One of his lasting impacts, though, we still live with, is the belief that corporations can create knowledge that can be efficiently commercialized. This is AT&T Bell Labs in Murray Hill, New Jersey. This is Xerox PARC, Palo Alto Research Center in Palo Alto, California, and there are many more. These are places of holy ground where businesses thought new knowledge was emerging, and it did. And they created many wonderful things. But what they're remembered for today is the things they didn't do. This gets to using other people's knowledge. Bell Laboratories, that first picture, invented a lot of great things like fiber optics, and they deployed it. But guess what? They also invented a version of the fax. They invented, clearly, the transistor, the laser. They didn't commercialize any of those things. Xerox PARC, the books have been written. There's many books you can read, very entertaining ones, about how they graphical user interface. We were talking about Windows and all that. You know, I don't care whether you're Apple or Microsoft, you use a graphical user interface. You use a mouse. And I know every time you open your laptop, every time you touch that mouse, I know it jumps out at you and says, "Thank you, Xerox." They let a couple crazy guys steal it. Steve Wozniak, Steve Jobs. They were happy to have them take it away. Why did they not care? They were so commercially oriented, they understood that their business was not selling any device. Xerox's business is toner, carbon dust. Right? That machine is an excuse to get you addicted to toner. Why? The machine, what's the margin on selling a capital-intense machine with high design attributes using components that are oftentimes provided by others? Margin might be 10%. Direct selling effort, high cost distribution. They got to finance it. They make money off the financing of it. What's the margin on a fancy looking cartridge that's proprietary, only goes in their machine, and you spent $10,000 or $50,000 on their machine? You can only get the toner from them and their cartridge. The cartridge, anybody ever spend $50 or $100 for a toner cartridge? Even today, for your little home thing, you spend $50 just for a cartridge to make. What's the margin there? 10%? 97%, would you believe? Choke on that one. I spend 3 cents and get 97 cents. I like that. So that's what they were addicted to. So were they lacking business focus? No, not at all. They said, ho, 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 have fun, guys. We're minting dollars over here. We're not going to go in that new market that doesn't exist yet. There was no market for personal computers when the Apple IIe came out. It was a hobbyist market. The IBM PC had not been created. The IBM Junior had not been created. You know, nothing. New market, oh, all sorts of risk, let somebody else play with that. We can always buy it back if we want to. Now, when markets accelerate quickly, guess what? They never could buy it back because they never could let themselves believe in the ultimate value. Even after the Apple IIe comes out and Apple is only 10 miles away from their offices, they can't believe that this thing will have eventually earth-shaking value. So why spend $50 million for the startup, $100 million for the startup, $300 million? What would you pay for Apple today? Market cap of $20 billion, whatever. Okay, so why didn't they do it? Lots of reasons. Too small a market, not our business, whatever. But for those guys from Apple, what strategy did they use to sort of create a new market? How did they do it? Well, one, they used somebody else's technology. They didn't spend a dime to create it. So they're definitely being incremental. And they looked at this process and said, you know, there are markets that are mature and huge. How do we come into those markets and participate? We're going to come in with something that doesn't work near as well. I mean, computers, my goodness, they were mainframes. They're very efficient. They do these great things. We're going to create this other little toy. I don't know if it had 64K of memory or 32K of memory the first time around. I mean, it's going to be truly inferior. Well, let's dial back to even before the computer. Let's take a bigger example. Sound is a series of discontinuous points of information. In other words, it's not a smooth amplitude modulation. It's amplitude modulation by approximation, right? Because you're digitizing everything. So it sounds a little more harsh or brittle. Now, I would never notice this, and maybe nobody can really notice it, but it's a theory, it's a belief, right? In the corner is this totally impractical device, because the electronic amplifier is more portable, can be moved around, can run on a battery if it had to, not really, very well. But the valve amplifier literally is 3 times the weight, is fragile, in fact, because if it drops an inch, those valves inside the filament can break, but it sounds better. It's a warm sound. So why am I talking about this here? Well, guess what? Not only all amplifiers, but all electronics, if I go back 50 years, were valve electronics. The electronics industry is not new. We had lots of electronics. Remember radar? Second World War? Lots of electronics. So, here we have 1950. Valves. Really understand them. In fact, today, if you go to buy a vacuum tube or a valve, most of them come from Russia, because they still have 1 or 2 manufacturing plants still manufacturing valves. I think they're the only ones left in the world fabricating valves. I mean, I really might be wrong on this, but I know when I want to go to buy one, it's a gray market item out of Russia. There's no innovation going on there. But boy, you know, this has been done well. It's not to mean it's archaic. It's a mature technology. So what replaces it? That's what replaces it. That's a transistor, a metal encased transistor. Now it would be an IC chip with, you know, tens of thousands of those transistors essentially have functionality embedded in one chip. So what do you do if you're the entrepreneur and that thing has essentially been invented? It's not in a metal jacket yet, it's still in epoxy, but that functionality has been invented. It does elements of what the valve does. Doesn't do it at high power, like a valve can amplify at high power, but it does this amplification process, rectification process. It does it in a rudimentary way. So what do you do with this component? What are its advantages? Well, it consumes much less power. It runs on DC, as does elements. It runs solely on DC. It doesn't require any AC, high voltage current. So it can use batteries as a power supply. Now, batteries at the time are not the small battery I have in here. Batteries are in these 9 voltage, you know, things, bricks, and other batteries, but they're lead acid batteries. They're not, they leak after a while. This is 1950. But it is portable. What do I do with the amplification capacity that I can portabilize? Do I go out and sell guitar amplifiers? Do I go out and sell radios and all the things one could create? I want to find a market that really I'm going to make a difference. Is there something I can do with this technology that isn't just replacing what people already do, but enables a whole new world to open up? Simple idea, amplifying sounds. People have known how to amplify sound now for 50, 100 years. Where can I amplify? Say what?
Hearing aids. Right?
Hearing aids. Brilliant. You knew that one already. No? Yes? Okay. Raytheon Corporation says if I put an amplifier and make it portable, and it's going to be this big cigar box, 10-pound thing, and put it on a strap, people will pay me $3,000 or $4,000 for that crazy device that stinks and does a lousy job, because they can now hear where before they could not hear. And enabling new functionality. And if I start and get that beachhead with the hearing aid, I can start manufacturing these things at more scale. Instead of 10 at a time, 1,000 at a time, instead of 1,000 at a time, 10,000 at a time. And remember those tools, I'm going to get engineering tools to make it more easier. And then Sony Corporation can come along and I'll sell these things. Instead of having to make the hearing aids sort of more or less myself and working closely with the manufacturer, I'll sell them to Sony Corporation, who's going to do what with them? Transistor radio. Is a transistor radio any good? No, it stinks. Right? But what's it good for? See that stuff out there? What do they do out there? Sports, right? Do you need high quality amplification to follow the game? No, you know, it's not music. It's a human voice, very narrow range of frequency response needed. And do I care about the timeliness of this? Do I want to know who won the game? No, I want to know the texture of the game. I want to be there virtually. I want to be there now. So I'll buy this portable radio that plays music but very badly so I can really hear the news and hear the sports, right? And then that generalizes, and then people start listening to music, and we get bigger speakers, and we get boom boxes, and we get Walkmans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there we are at iTunes. But the revolution happens here. And what happens when that revolution happens? What happens is that the guys who used to own the world get blown up. Remember that destruction? Well, they don't respond. I mean, RCA, Radio Corporation of America, ever hear of it? Zenith Corporation, Grundig. Some of these names still exist, but they used to be monsters. They used to be huge. Gone. Right? Replaced with things that, you know, people that were selling junk. You know, Sony Corporation, little Japanese company, you know, they can't make anything of quality. I mean, they've become a huge design house, some of the best consumer products development. Where'd they get the scale to do that? So, you go into a consumer electronics store now, there's not a name that existed 20 years ago in scale, or 50 years ago in scale. So, what Christensen's research proves, that he didn't have this data set when he wrote his book, he was doing it on steam shovels. But what he proved was that the incumbents get destroyed, the point we earlier made. But what's the takeaway today? Right now we're talking about the strategy for the entrepreneur. And the strategy for the entrepreneur is get thee to a beachhead, get thee to a niche, provide functionality that isn't faster, better, cheaper, you know, that competes with an existing solution, but totally new enabling capacity. Find people who will pay a fortune for it and give it to them, and give it to them in quality. And then perhaps retreat to selling components versus a solution as you scale, and hold on to the elements of most discrete value add. And you might let other, you know, if you're in the consumer products business and that's what you do well, you hold on to the customer, being the end user customer. If you're an electronics firm, you might hold on to the IP, the intellectual property, the manufacturing capacity around the key components and let others commercialize. In fact, that's what Raytheon did. Once demonstrating the hearing aid, it really didn't have to sell them to the end user. Other companies emerged that sold the end product.